Good day, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching Váleční štváči. Thank you to everyone who joined the live stream. Kermit and Hochi are here, I'm here, and the United States will capitulate and sign the Versailles Agreement with Iran and maybe pay war reparations. We will discuss what is true about this and its details. Of course, we can start with a quick summary of what's actually happening, and that is indeed a likely peace agreement is indeed coming together here. And Trumpy signed it together with the Iranian president in Versailles after the G7, and so far it's not a full-fledged peace agreement, but only a 60-day ceasefire, which is also supposed to apply to Lebanon, and then the goal is to continue with the nuclear talks. Now let's probably go through the details. 2 points, and each of you will say something about them, okay? Because here, by the way, there's a very important point that the Hormuz Strait will be reopened without fees, which is a route that's critical for 20% of the world's oil. It's good to mention that in this regard, the United States says without fees, but Iran says, hey, we didn't talk about it being without fees. That's not something we wanted or mentioned, right? So most likely it could be that the international route between the Omani coastal zone and the Iranian coastal zone will be the place where Iran would want to somehow enforce some fees, even if it's not official, but the ships might prefer to pay them anyway. And then there will be the option that the ships could sail through Omani territorial waters, through Oman's sovereign waters, and there would be no fees to pay there. So let's move on to the first point, the operation of the Strait of Hormuz. How do you see it? And I think it's fine if Hochi starts, right?
Okay, so I'll start. And this point actually comes from the previous or the last peace agreement, which wasn't really a peace agreement. It was just another memorandum. And we all know that memorandums aren't really that binding. And they weren't either. And they were talking there about reopening it for international trade. But the Iranians always said that they want to have a share in the control, so that something similar couldn't happen again, and they would have insurance against America.
Aha, which means you have to elaborate on that.
Which means that even though it will be open for trade, it actually strengthens Iran's control over it. That means Iran is becoming a stronger player in the region because of this.
Kermit, what do you have to say about this opening?
Well, a really great move. We have to sign contracts and wage wars just to have something that used to be normal.
Great.
Great thing. I think not like for the world market it's great, but for us it's great because it's cheap oil. China must be absolutely thrilled about it, and India too. But it just seems to me damn like it's for us to close Hormuz so that we can then open Hormuz. It just seems to me completely absurd.
You're right. In this regard, I'm not saying that anything was achieved here, because in the end, what was achieved by this agreement is a worse situation than before the war. So the United States fought a war only to end up in a worse position than they were before it. That's why I say the United States lost this war, because no matter what happened on the battlefield, in the end, the situation is worse than it was before the war. I think we can agree on that, guys?
Yeah, we can definitely agree on that.
Kermit?
We agree on that too.
Great. Feel free to write in the comments, those of you who are watching or watching the recording, how you perceive it. When we look at oil prices, it's true that they're going down for now, but that's also because oil is currently being released from reserves, and it's also mainly because the market wants peace and for things to calm down. So it's obviously a temporary drop, and if it turns out that things aren't calm, the prices will go up again. But right now, since the market wants the situation to calm down, and since the media makes it look like something positive could happen, the market is already expecting oil to get cheaper and the price is already going down. But of course, we'll only feel it at the gas stations after some time. So the opening of Hormuz? I'll just add that the Europeans have promised to help with demining Hormuz if necessary. So theoretically, those shipping routes could be expanded. There have been several cases where ships took the Omani route, but the problem is that Hormuz is narrow and there's really only a small space for the largest ships with a deep draft to pass through. And the question is, how much space is there in Omani waters for tankers to sail through, right? And it's possible that there isn't much space there, so if all those tankers tried to sail through Omani waters, the traffic would get complicated, delayed, more expensive, and it would simply have a negative impact on the price of oil, on trade, and on the flow of spices. Besides, the low price of oil, as I said, is more of a wishful thinking because the oil markets don't really behave very rationally. Because as you surely know, the damage that has already been done to those countries and to the various storage facilities and refineries on the Arabian Peninsula, those are things that will take a long time to fix, and the trade is so disrupted that it shouldn't return to a good state this quickly. Therefore, I assume that the decline will really be temporary, and then the drop in oil prices will stop, or it will go up a bit again, right? What do you think about this? Take care. Thank you.
Well, how should I put it? It's wishful thinking, if I can say it like that. And the market wants so much for things to return to normal that even though things won't return to normal in numbers, everyone will definitely act like they have, and they'll do everything they can to get things back to normal as much and as quickly as possible.
But of course, that's not possible, right? Because you can't fool reality. So if you treat oil and all the other products that have been disrupted as if nothing happened and everything is fine, the real state of things will catch up with you very quickly. We agree on that. Or
Probably yes. The question is how bad it will be, how visible it will be, and how much we'll all wish we didn't actually see it. Of course, if a mine floats by and then blows up a tanker, that's obviously going to be a huge disaster, but it depends if it happens once or if it happens 10 times. And since the whole market and the whole world are already tired of it and everyone is kind of pissed off about it, especially at Donald, I'd say we'll almost go back to, or rather it'll be like that meme where it says Iran has at most 10,000 naval mines and there are over 100,000 commercial ships in the world. If we keep sending one ship after another, then mathematically sooner or later we'll clear the Strait of Hormuz.
maybe it would be better to send European minesweepers there. Hauchi, do you have anything to add?
I agree, but if we push really hard to keep the oil flowing, then mathematically we'll be clearing the Hormuz.
Weren't you the Soviet commander at Stalingrad?
No.
No, it looks like you were. So anyway, Hauchi, do you have anything else to add? About oil prices, which by the way have dropped very quickly right now from around $90 per barrel to the current $75 per barrel. So that's the amount as of Thursday evening, right? We'll see how it is when you watch this recording. Hauchi, do you have anything else to add, or can we move on to the next points in the agreement?
Yes, so you've already talked here about the price going down, and then you expect it to go up a bit. And I have slightly different expectations. The price is currently at 75.
Yes.
Well, of course, it will drop a little more, but then it will go back up again. Because those tankers are stuck there for several months, and it will take several months before it shows. That means, until the unloading of those tankers and the price drop of that supply shows, it will be more expensive. Yeah, it just dropped now, and it will go up for a while, for several months, until the current supply is sold out, and then it will finally start to drop. Yeah, okay.
I would almost disagree with you.
How come?
If this whole commotion showed anything, it's that oil and the price of oil on the market actually don't reflect its real quantity and value at all.
Well, as long as there's enough of it, then no, right?
Yeah, that's true, but you saw for yourself that the market moves based on what Donald writes on Twitter, not based on whether there's actually a lot of oil or whether it's being loaded or unloaded or what actually happened.
Well, that's because there was still enough of it at that moment, right? because the market wasn't behaving rationally at that time since it didn't see the shortage. But if it had lasted even longer, the market would have had to behave rationally and adjust according to how much oil was actually flowing and at what price.
Alright, but even so, it seemed to me that if this maneuvering showed anything, it was that the actual amount of oil on the market doesn't necessarily reflect the price.
No, it doesn't have to, of course not. Only when a real shortage comes, then it has to be reflected. As long as the shortage isn't visible, it doesn't necessarily have to be reflected and like really and truthfully.
We'll see. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be that way.
Hoshi, did you want to say something?
Maybe just about that bending of the truth you mentioned. You can't bend the truth unless you're the American president.
I disagree, but let's move on. So, the next point, which is actually a big victory for Iran, is the lifting of sanctions. This is something that seems to me like the biggest American concession. It's hard to say whether it's the biggest or the second biggest American concession, but the lifting of sanctions, what kind of impact do you think this could have on Iran? In my opinion, it will significantly strengthen the legitimacy of the regime because it will be able to greatly and very quickly improve the quality of life of its citizens. It will go from 0 to 100 very quickly. And given the current state of Iran, even any small improvement, like the market being flooded with some cheap goods or ordinary products and so on, will be very noticeable. What do you think about that? Or do you have anything else you would like to add? Kermit?
Well, it's definitely a mistake because the Iranian regime, even though we saw it in a more positive light compared to America and that it won, is definitely not a country we should support by lifting sanctions. And in the future, it could come back to us like a boomerang. Whether it's by strengthening their domestic sort of existing policy, which this war has also contributed to. So it can strengthen their technological advancement and their danger, if I can put it that way, in the whole region.
I would just like to correct here, if you perceived Iran as positive compared to the United States, then I think we misunderstood each other. I have always been clearly on the side, and I am clearly on the side of the United States, and all my criticisms were because the operation against Iran is just really bad, and it will strengthen the terrible regime that is there, which is now becoming evident. I was never on the side of Iran. I was only ever of the view that if Iran was going to be destroyed anyway, then we should carry out a proper crusade there, right? Which didn't happen. Anyway, just so we're clear, you can go ahead and correct your statement that you saw Iran positively if you want.
First, Iran was legitimately attacked and had the legitimate right to defend itself by all means.
Of course it did, but I wasn't rooting for it.
Thank you for your attention. I guess I was kind of rooting for it.
Collaborator. So, what are your thoughts on lifting sanctions and strengthening the regime?
But considering that the first sanctions, which are still in effect to this day, date back to 1984, and even those should be lifted, it seems to me like what better could have happened to Iran? Simply, you do nothing and suddenly this falls into your lap.
Theoretically, what could have happened to them is that Trump wouldn't have reinstated the sanctions that Obama lifted, and so they would have had the sanctions lifted even without a war. The question now is whether this war, despite short-term destruction, could ultimately benefit them more than if it hadn't happened. If you know what I mean. Whether it really won't be such a massive boost to the regime's legitimacy that, if the war hadn't happened, the regime could have been abolished. It could have just fallen apart over time, and now this one war might give them another 50 years, for example, before they actually collapse. What do you think about that?
It definitely strengthened the regime because the regime was based on being led by an old leader. Yeah, and how old was he? Over 80 years old.
He was old, yeah.
He was there at the birth of the Islamic Revolution. That's a lot of time, and a sharp stone will become dull over time, so it gets worn down and becomes blunt. Takže And they allowed an even more extremist part of society to come to the forefront, which is now leading it. So for America, it's simply a huge failure and a huge loss. Now that country will actually become stronger because of the sanctions, and it can use that to expand its influence.
I'd like to add something to that, but I'll let Kermit speak if he wants to say anything else. Well,
That in these, how should I put it, totalitarian countries, a sudden replacement of a large part of the leadership can either lead to a gradual loosening, theoretically even collapse, or to an extreme tightening of the regime. In this case, I'd bet more on the tightening of the regime. In this case, I'd bet more on the tightening of the regime and the consolidation of the current policy.
Well, it's like this. They removed a person who didn't like America, but they've appointed someone who hates America and wants to destroy it.
They put in a guy whose father was killed by America, and now they're expecting him to like America more than the previous one. I don't think so, but that's just my guess for now.
there might be some truth to what you're saying. I would also add that the current Mochtepecha Meneji, who is a much tougher leader than his predecessor, his father, would most likely never have come to power if it weren't for the invasion. In a country like Iran, for religious reasons, and also because they pretend to be a republic, something like passing down power within a family, a kind of monarchism, is something that shouldn't have happened. That was something that should never have been allowed to happen, whether for religious or republican reasons, and now it has happened. So that's also a certain change, something that was made possible by the United States, which probably wouldn't have happened without them. What do you say to that?
Well, he wasn't even a candidate originally, because the next successor is always elected. A group, how should I put it, of elder wise men, but I can't remember the exact name, what it's officially called. And usually the next head becomes one of this circle. But since so many people were removed, it was necessary to simply choose the strongest leader. So as the strongest, most extreme, and most aggressive, this person was chosen or appointed. So, with the help of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who of course took advantage of the chaos and confusion and the cycle of appointing new people, they placed their own military people in those positions. A lot of generals and members of the Revolutionary Guards got into positions like ministers and similar roles.
I have nothing to say to that. I have no way or reason to dispute that. Let's move on to another important point of the agreement, which is Iran's commitment not to acquire or produce nuclear weapons. I'd like to use a nice analogy for this, though I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard it on one of the streams. It's like Iran's commitment not to acquire nuclear weapons is similar to having a roommate who you think wants to stab you. He bought a military knife and told you, but I don't want to stab you. I just have a military knife. That doesn't mean I want to stab you. Maybe I use it for bread, right? And you would just attack him, beat him up, but he would overpower you in his own way, and then you would make a deal, okay, so you won't stab me. And he said, yeah, exactly, I won't stab you, and now I'm going to sharpen my military knife so I can't stab you. Yeah, like Iran has always said they don't want nuclear weapons. They've never said they want them. So when they say again now that they don't want them, it might look like the United States achieved something when Iran says, okay, we won't make nuclear weapons, but actually they didn't achieve anything because Iran has always said they won't make nuclear weapons. What do you say to that, guys?
Well, not only did they say that, but before America, about a year or a year and a half ago, bombed their uranium enrichment facility, there was an international commission there monitoring the uranium enrichment.
Yeah, but I have an observation or an argument about this, that these commissioners are usually only allowed into places where Iran wants them to be allowed. And most of the time, they're not allowed into secret military bases or anything like that. So Iran could easily just call those uranium enrichment facilities a secret military base, and the commissioners wouldn't be able to enter. But even so, they were able to detect that there was uranium there, traces of enriched uranium, even though they weren't fully allowed to investigate it perfectly. Yeah.
Well, you said it right. The fact that they weren't even allowed into some of those labs, sure, that's a completely fair argument. It means they couldn't have it 100% under control. But to even start enriching uranium, even at the lowest level, you have to invest a huge amount of money. You need to have a place to do it, so you have to build it, and you need a lot of resources, material resources, to be able to do it. That means you can track these individual parts, and based on that, you can start to determine if something is happening, possibly how much and to what percentage it could be enriched, and you base it on these enrichment factors. A vycházíš tady těchto statistik.
Yeah, sure. So that means in a way that theoretically it's possible to find out whether Iran is making a nuclear weapon or not. And even if they say they're not making it, the Americans can say, but we suspect you are, so we're putting sanctions back in place. Then Iran can say, okay, we're not making it, but if you impose sanctions, we'll close the Strait of Hormuz, and we're right back where we started, right? Then the question is whether we value the open Strait of Hormuz and free maritime navigation more, or whether Iran values not having sanctions imposed on it more.
Since Iran has been under sanctions for so long, it basically doesn't care if there are sanctions anymore.
So it has a stronger hand here?
Yes, the economy is suffocating, but as you can see, the economy hasn't collapsed.
And besides, you can see that, let's say they keep it up for maybe 2 years, they'll catch their breath. So they'll agree to reimpose those sanctions, right?
Yeah, sure.
Kermit, do you have anything to add?
They've lived with sanctions for the last 30 years. I mean, with sanctions for the last 30 years. I think if there are any new ones, they'll probably survive those too. And what was the other thing that was sanctions and nukes? Well, Iran technically never had nuclear weapons. It was always just about them getting closer to making them, but they never actually conducted a test, and we never had any reports that they actually finished the bomb itself.
Careful, getting closer according to Israeli reports. It's also important to add that, right?
Alright, according to Israeli reports. And every time it ended up with the United States and Israel stepping in to delay it for them. Last time it was pretty bad that they told them early enough so they could move all the uranium, but that's beside the point. So this whole charade about us saying you can't have nuclear weapons and them saying we don't have nuclear weapons. Aha, that's how it's been going for the last 20 years, so it seems almost irrelevant to even deal with it anymore.
So it's another one of those wins that aren't really wins. Basically,
We're basically where we were, like honestly, I don't think anything will really change. They'll keep saying Iran shouldn't have nuclear weapons and Iran will keep insisting they don't have them.
I'm afraid to call it a white peace because honestly, I feel like the situation has actually gotten worse rather than stayed the same. Also because another important point is the plan for a reconstruction fund worth $300 billion from the United States. That means the United States and the surrounding Arab countries will pay Iran for the repairs. That's reparations. Call it whatever you want, that's reparations.
That's reparations, right? It likely comes from the English word repair, doesn't it?
Yes, but it's called a reconstruction fund, so you can sell it as an investment opportunity and so on.
So it sounds better to voters.
Exactly. Okay.
Sorry, I had to handle something with 3 keys.
All right.
If you could quickly bring me up to speed.
Well, we were talking about how America and the surrounding Arab countries are supposed to pay Iran $300 billion for a reconstruction fund. It's being sold as a reconstruction fund with the idea that you can invest there, make money, and so on. But personally, I see it as American reparations to Iran, especially since there's nothing like Iran paying the Arab countries for their bombed-out refineries. Trump says Like originally we were supposed to pay them 400 billion, so the 100 billion is basically as if Iran paid us, so it got deducted from that, but I don't really see it that way. What about you? I just see it as reparations to Iran, which Iran managed to get because it has a stronger position in this situation.
Like originally you were supposed to pay a debt of 50,000, but you only pay 40,000, so I made 10,000.
Is that right?
No, that's total bullshit. Like that, and the money, sure, Trump started negotiating with those countries so that they'd contribute. America protected them so they'd contribute. But in those countries, there are mostly American bases that are leased, which means those countries get that money back in rent. You just raise the rent.
And we haven't even talked about the fact that there's talk about Iran's wish or pressure to reduce the American military presence in the region.
We haven't talked about that either, and that's not exactly good news for America either.
That would really be a complete, total capitulation. Iran might even want the American army to have a maximum of 100,000 troops or something like that.
Ban them from producing tanks, right?
Yes.
Or nuclear weapons.
When it's being signed in Versailles. D'accord?
Yes.
And now Israel, that unfortunate Israel, which considers this a huge betrayal, and at the same time, it can be a wild card because, of course, it's supposed to involve Lebanon as well. The ceasefire, yeah. And Israel, through its defense minister, if I'm not mistaken, has already stated that it absolutely doesn't care. So what now?
I'm not sure if it was the defense or national security minister. They're different.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Just a minister, okay? A high-ranking politician who is in the government.
Well, it's a minister who comes from the far right, and a very orthodox one who once, when the first memorandums were being discussed, said that it's an American memorandum and that Israel has nothing to do with it and will not recognize it. And now what they said is basically just being confirmed.
But America
probably wants
for it to turn out like this. So it will put some pressure on Israel. That
is quite possible, but Israel is also able to put pressure on America.
Yes, I know how you feel about the Jews controlling America.
I know. That's how he pays with Kermit.
Yes, so I apologize for that. Anyway, I know these theories of yours may be sometimes proven in practice, but mostly just theories. And I understand your lack of trust. However, regardless of whether peace will eventually happen or not, and regardless of whether Iran will get what it wants or not, the very rift that this is causing between Israel and the United States is to some extent once again a victory for Tehran.
No, because the rift isn't that deep.
No, the rift will be deep if this is really about ending the war, which the United States wants to end, while Israel does not.
No, but okay, he says that's right, if there is an end. But since the agreement also involves Lebanon, and Israel says it will continue, which brings us back to the fact that the condition isn't met, which brings us back to the fact that peace won't be signed. No.
That's not it. You're saying it the other way around. I said that if the agreement is ultimately broken because of Israel, and we see that the United States really wants peace and wants to end this, and if Israel sabotages it, then the rift here will be deep. Because this isn't child's play. This is literally about ending or not ending the war. This is something that can brutally mess up the relationships, and that's just the way things are. The moment it doesn't end, the relationship between the United States and Israel will be totally messed up. And the moment it does end, the relationship between the United States and Israel will be totally messed up. In both cases, the relationship between the United States and Israel will be totally messed up. It's hard to say whether things will get more messed up if it ends or if it doesn't. I'd say things will get more messed up if it doesn't end, but they'll still get messed up even if it does. Do you understand me?
No, I understand you. I'm just telling you that it's not such a crucial part because Israel is America's only and key ally in the region. So even if you're pissed off at them, You just won't cut their funding because they're your only defense in the region against all your enemies and all the terrorists.
What kind of nonsense is that? Saudi Arabia cooperates perfectly with the United States and Israel.
Saudi Arabia is stopping terrorism.
And Israel?
How are they doing? How are they doing in Yemen?
Sure, of course, Israel is here in the position of forcing the United States to stay in a war they don't want to be in. That's one. This negotiation is also just like football. Kermit, what do you think about it? Step in? Because for me, this is a situation that will seriously damage relationships in both cases, and it will damage them even more, or it will damage them more if it continues, if Israel does not allow the conclusion of this peace agreement.
Israel will definitely try to somehow prevent the conclusion of the peace agreement, whether through some provocation or just by whatever means, by attacking Iran itself. By attacking Iran itself. And we'll see how strong the Americans' nerves are and how willing the Iranians are to listen to America, which says, well, yeah, that's my retarded friend. Don't pay any attention to him. He'll get over it soon. I'll talk to him. I don't think they'll want to listen to that for very long, but on the other hand, at the moment, they don't have many options to retaliate without messing everything up, because I believe that Iran is also fed up with this by now.
So you agree with me that this is damaging the relationship between Israel and the United States?
Definitely, but I would say that the breaking, if I can put it that way, is coming from Israel. Israel definitely wants more from the United States than the United States is willing to give. I absolutely agree with that, and that's really the issue here.
I absolutely agree with that, and here it's really inappropriate for Israel to dictate to the United States like this and to throw a wrench into their plans and their geopolitics, right? Of course, Israel is an independent sovereign state, but so are the United States. So when such sabotage comes from Israel, it's appropriate for the United States to consider whether their alliance with Israel is still worth it, especially if Israel drags them into a war and doesn't want to let them leave. Yeah, think about it.
That's a question for the future.
That's a question for the future, and I would also like to add here that the money the United States will be paying should come from some frozen funds that the United States is holding. Which are supposedly supposed to belong to Iran, and the United States is holding them, so theoretically it wouldn't necessarily be reparations in the true sense of the word if it doesn't come from real, genuine American money. There's something to that. On the other hand, if we looked at it from the perspective of, say, the Ukrainian conflict, then at the moment when we took those frozen Russian funds and used them to rebuild Ukraine, then it would be considered reparations. No, that's not the same case. Sorry, I apologize. They would have to be used to rebuild Russia. Okay, it's not the same case. I apologize. But it's definitely a certain concession. I guess we can agree on that.
Definitely.
Fine. All right, so this was an Iranian-American situation. Let me remind you that you can watch the full episode of the podcast Warmongers on Hero or as members, or whenever you come to see it live, you'll see everything nicely, for free. And you'll also be able to join in and discuss with us between the different topics. Now, after we've discussed Iran, we'll take a look at what's happening in Ukraine, and especially how Moscow is burning. So don't go anywhere, we're continuing. Take a look and wait for the next topic.